Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kath Koo, Head of Venture Support and Partnerships at Villgro Philippines, and I will be leading today's discussion on smashing the gender finance gap, investment readiness for women entrepreneurs. And allow me to introduce our panelists for today joining our discussion. The first is the co founder and CEO of Villgro Philippines, which is an early stage impact enterprise incubator that funds, mentors, and nurtures social entrepreneurs. She also co founded Unlock Impact, a social impact advisory firm focused on scaling inclusive solutions that tackle gender and climate across Asia Pacific. She's the co chair of the Andy East and Southeast Asia Steering Committee and the host of the podcast Talk Impact. In 2020, she was recognized as a youth gender champion by the UN Women WEPS Awards for Asia Pacific. Help me in welcoming Ms. Priya Tachidi. Our second panelist is the co-founder and managing partner of Invest, which is an impact investment firm that promotes gender lens investing for women-owned and led small growing businesses in the Philippines and provides tailor-fit growth investments for them. He is one of the 2021 UN Asia Pacific WEPS Awards Youth Leadership winners and is an advocate for gender equity, equality, and empowerment. Help me in welcoming Mr. David Pangan. Our next panelist is the investment director of SWEEF, a Singapore-based impact investment firm investing in the potential of women and the future of Southeast Asia. She's the director of their firm and a senior member of the investment team, actively involved in building SWEEF Capital's investment approach and deal pipeline, which focuses on enabling women to realize their potential as leaders in their communities through the development of their impact framework and diversity and inclusion tools. Help me in welcoming Ms. Rowena Reyes. And lastly, to round out our panel for today, is the founder of Green Habits, a social enterprise with a mission of building sustainable and resilient farming communities through agro entrepreneurship. She is committed to working with farming communities, connecting them directly to institutional buyers across the Davao region. She is currently working with the Impact Pioneers Network to expand her reach in the greater Region 11 area. Help me in welcoming Ms. Nelben Moreno. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, for today's panel discussion. And such a great topic that we have, smashing the gender financing gap. So to kick us off, I'd love to, start the question with what exactly is the gender financing gap? And, what exactly do we face here? What are the challenges that women entrepreneurs face, not only in the Philippines, but all across the globe? Priya, maybe I can toss this question to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kath. And, great to be here with so many gender equality champions. So excited to have this discussion. And yeah, I think the statement and the problem has been talked about quite a bit. It's kind of the hot topic, but it is because it is reality. Um, we do know, I think there's a kind of a data number that's been running around, that really has been showcasing, which is that only 1% of female founders raise venture capital globally. And over the last 2 years, since we've been hearing the data, things haven't improved dramatically, though there has been, a lot more conversation around it, and, incredible people like David and Rowena who are working towards changing that along with us, and, entrepreneurs that are continuing to do that. Here, closer to home here in the Philippines, we do know that majority of MSMEs are led by women. And which means that they are everywhere, right? They are visible. But when we start applying the lens of, okay, how many of them have managed to grow if they wanted to do that? How many of them have accessed capital if that was their ambition? Then that number becomes very small. By some accounts, it is said that there is a financial gap of about $76 billion. That's some estimates. That's huge. It might even be bigger. If you look at Southeast Asia, only about 11% of female-led ventures are raising private equity or venture capital. And when we start looking at the financing gap globally, this, it's close to $1 trillion, right? That means fundamentally women-led ventures, women-owned businesses are a hugely underserved market. And I don't think that this is only a challenge for the women entrepreneurs. I think we tend to always frame it, okay, like what do women entrepreneurs need to do better? It's also a question of there's something also challenging on the market side, on the supply side of capital, which I think many of us are trying to address. So when we look at the numbers, the story is not great. We are failing our women entrepreneurs, but I'm very, very encouraged by what we are seeing, especially in Southeast Asia. There's a great movement towards, more gender lens investing, and more towards more new funds that are coming up. And I'm sure we'll hear from David and Winnie soon. But also that women entrepreneurs are out there fundraising. That's the good news. But we have to do much, much better. There's a long and big, huge mountain to climb.
Wonderful. Thank you, Priya. I'd like to kind of pass it on to both Winnie and David, right? As leaders within your own firms. Could you share with us what are the current products that exist in the market for women entrepreneurs?
David, shall I go ahead? Okay. So, given the numbers that Priya mentioned earlier, as access to capital has always been a constraint for women entrepreneurs, as well as a business support. So, with that in mind, Swift Capital is very deliberate in incorporating gender considerations holistically in its investment strategies and impact framework, and throughout the investment cycle, from due diligence to active management practices, exit strategies, and reporting. So, at the heart of our work, we aim to demonstrate gender lens as a strong investment strategy, which can deliver market adjusted rate for its investors, as well as social impact for its stakeholders. So, in that, with that in mind, we are targeting through private equity investments high growth opportunities in sectors such as healthcare, education, food products and services, as well as climate resistance that will, ultimately deliver financial returns as well as improve the livelihoods of the families affecting that. And, in this regard, we are in particular targeting four pillars of investment opportunities, and these are women-led firms, which is addressing the financing gap for women leadership positions in SMEs, as well as improving their business skills. We are looking at women sectors. These are firms which employ a lot of women in their labor force and be providing a critical labor and social protection in the process. Thirdly, we are looking at companies that manufacture goods and services and provide services for women, meeting unmet needs of women. And fourth is actually just investing in women who are, or in companies that are using gender diversity as part of its business model. So with that above, with the criteria above, we are looking at how gender and diversity is actually integral as part of the business model, so that it's really inherent in the business, and how we can deepen the impact of gender action plans and interventions. So we actively manage our portfolio companies as an equity shareholder, so we can influence policies and have a say in the direction of the company in terms of empowering its women, not just its employees, but its value chains, its customers, and other stakeholders in that community. So to monitor our impact, we have developed a tool that monitors advances in diversity and gender equality, so that we can provide the appropriate interventions and deepen the impact all throughout their investment strategy. So I guess the product that we are actually looking at in this aspect is a private equity investment in high growth companies in the region.
Great. Thanks so much, Winnie. I'd like to toss it to Dave. So, Dave, Winnie just kind of shared with us the overall strategy at SWEEF, which is also a regional fund. On your end, you would, sort of spun off from a regional fund to create a more local fund. And so, can you share with us, what are some of the things that you've been seeing here in the ecosystem? What are some of the flexible products that you offer to women entrepreneurs? And what has that experience been like, working with women entrepreneurs, particularly those who are raising in the pandemic?
Thanks, Kathy. As you mentioned, Invest was launched last year. So we incorporated in July, and we were able to close our first funding around November. So we're a full pandemic baby, full term pandemic baby. From the time that we launched all the way till now, we've closed four deals so far, larger deals, which we call strategic finance, and four deals in the product that we call short-term financing, but more specifically called the backwards and forward financing facility. So, as Kathy mentioned, there are landscape-wise, there are traditional solutions to the funding gap needed by SMEs, SMEs in particular, which are typically bank provided. You have alternative financing, the forms of informal lenders, and you do have emerging um, alternative funders as well, the likes of Esquire, the likes of First Circle, and other debt providers, and even some of the foundations that are based in the Philippines that are doing investments into social enterprises have addressed some of these gaps, but are clearly not sufficient. And as Priya was mentioning, it's even though there is some liquidity availability in the market, not a lot of it goes directly to women-owned and women-led businesses. And so, our solution with Invest is that before we started, we really scoped the market to see where the opportunities lie. We're lucky that we're on the ground and we can get a pulse of the market quite easily. So, being a Philippine-focused impact investment firm, we've seen two basic needs in the market. So one is long-term capital, of course, for women-owned and led businesses that are still growing even amidst the pandemic, or are able to pivot or able to refocus their businesses during the pandemic that needs time for it to grow. We have long-term solutions where we invest anywhere from 5 to 15 million pesos per investment. So this is your more tailor fit solution, really pegged on how the company will grow and what's the cash flow of the company. So it's really flexible products, right? So it can be equity, it can be hybrid, or anything in between, preferred equity, etc. And so, like I said, we've done four investments there already, mostly for resilient businesses that are still doing well even amidst COVID. So you have food security as one of the things that we're doing, traffic and tech safety. We're also doing student loan financing. And then the new product we launched this year, the backward and forward financing facility. This is more geared towards, let's say, incubating smaller investments that we can take into the next stage. So we're creating kind of our own vertical, right? Because we do see the need for investing in smaller companies that are, let's say, a little bit more risky, but you share the joys and the pains in the start, and then you're able to reap more of the benefits as they continue to grow. And so with this investment product, we invest anywhere from 500,000 pesos to 3 million pesos. It's a pure debt facility, and it does a maximum tenor of 18 months. And the goal is that after these 18 months, we can then do the long-term strategic financing with them. But it helps them build the track record. It helps them formalize their corporate structure. So we offer this product to single proprietors, to BMBEs, even associations and cooperatives, so that they can, yeah, take their growth to the next level, and we can join them, starting up all the way to, let's say, a bit more mature in terms of growth. And then, in addition to those two, when we are able to invest into a more long-term partnership, we also offer technical assistance. So this is anywhere between 100,000 to 300,000 pesos per company, which can be used in any number of ways, depending on the need of the company. So in our pipeline right now, one of the things that we're exploring is potentially automation of their manufacturing process. We're also exploring improving of the corporate structure of the company. So basically creating a holding system, or creating a loan guarantee fund. So it really depends on what the business needs. And the most let's say interesting approach that we've had for the TA facility was someone actually asking for a life coach, because that's what they needed for the business right now for it to survive, was a life coach for the CEO. So it's really for the benefit of the company.
Great. Thank you so much, Winnie and Dave, and great to hear, how intentional you are in the design of the fund and the support mechanisms that are available to women entrepreneurs. I'd like to, call our only entrepreneur on the panel. So Nelven, you're a women entrepreneur. I think you're very familiar with the struggles that Priya was sharing earlier. And you've also been fundraising. So I'd like to ask, what has that experience been like for you? And what have been some of the challenges that you've faced?
Mm. Thanks, Kath. My journey towards accessing finance is tough. Green Habits was founded in 2020. Also, a pandemic enterprise born. And I belong to the agriculture sector, and that sector is really dominated by men. So unlike in the textile or the fashion industries where women are well recognized, in agriculture it's really a lot of men managing the enterprises, the companies here. So prior to joining Villgro Philippines, I started sharing my story to few investors. Of course, they are men in my industry, and they're operating in a business for profit ecosystem. So hearing from a woman who's into agriculture and a social entrepreneur at that, um it's quite new to them. So it took me some time to get a feedback from them as to are they going to invest in the enterprise, or are there any support that they're going to give us. So when I was accepted in the Women Entrepreneurs Rise program of Villgro, I was really happy because I found my pack. There, I could really share my struggles with fellow women entrepreneurs. So, what I experienced is that if you are talking to the same women led businesses, it gives you the confidence to talk about your struggles, and they also give you advice on to how to mobilize to be able to get the resources. But going back to my story, with the scenario that or the experience that I had, I really developed a fear of failure in investment before, because you see, being in an industry that is dominated by men is quite scary because I'm new and I know how tough they could be. So, but again, there was a program about women entrepreneurs, and I was um, happily accepted in that program. So it gives me a way to be able to access the investment that really I need for the enterprise.
Great. Thanks so much, Nelben. And for those wondering, so Nelben was part of our pioneer cohort of the We Rise program, which is a program that we designed specifically for women entrepreneurs. And Nelben, you recently closed an investment with the Impact Pioneers Network as well. Do you want to share a little bit about what that journey was like for you?
Okay. When I was able to access a finance from Impact Pioneers Network, there were a series also of coaching that I got. One is the financing coaching, financial coaching, in which they taught me on how to prepare the balance sheet, the other things that are needed in your financial documents. Aside from that, they also taught me how to pitch in a manner that it is clear to your investors and in a manner that is not so, let's say, having let's say high promises, or in a way that it's not grounded by the truth that, being a startup, of course, it's understandable that, you will not really gain much on your first year. They give me that kind of coaching to have a projection that's um how do you say that one, a projection that is tama-tama lang, something like that. Mm-mm. So those were the things that I learned from being in the Impact Pioneers Network.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nelven. And I love how you also touched on, some pitch training and support that was given to you. And I want to thank, both Dave and Winnie, who have also been part of our Pitch Perfect series as part of the We Rise community, right? Where women entrepreneurs, have no expectations of closing a deal, but really are able to practice their pitches and receive feedback in real time. Thanks, Nelvin. I'll shift gears a little bit and move the conversation towards what it means to be investment ready, right? And I think we talk a lot about that in the ecosystem, and particularly, how some women entrepreneurs, because they're very, calculated, right? They tend to, kind of be very meticulous about their projections. Like Nelvin was saying, right? They tend to be more on the risk averse side. So, what can women entrepreneurs do, right, to become more investment ready? Priya, maybe I'll toss it to you. What are some of the practices that women entrepreneurs can adopt when they're going on this journey like Nelvin has?
Yeah. Great. That's a great question. And the journey is long, right? Because you need different types of capital as you continue to grow. As you were kind of referring to earlier, Kath, over the pandemic year, we ran our accelerator program really focused on this particular issue. And there were two or three big challenges actually that came up. One was around, of course, like everything that Nelvin said was validated and resoundingly validated by, the 20 women entrepreneurs that were in our program. But we kind of zoomed in on two or three key problems, which I think I'm sure David and Vinny also come across quite a lot. First is that there is that fear of whether actually we should actually raise capital, or because women are building cash flow positive businesses. They are saving money, they are reinvesting into their businesses, and that's just the operating model for most of them. And that's because of the risk kind of levels that there's a lot at stake if they fail. It's families, communities, children. And so that's the type of businesses, which is fantastic, which is very different from the type of stories that we hear of, like, spend all the money and like raise money to kind of, get. They're very revenue focused, which I think is a great positive that we don't always highlight. But there were two or three big challenges that we saw. Number one was that because of this fear, they were really thinking quite short term. And not really thinking about actually how much capital do you need and what kind of capital do you need. And there were some challenges in ability in assessing these two pieces, which meant that, many of them, when we started out and in the first workshop when we asked, they had only 1 or 2 months of runway, and some didn't even have 1 month, which was so stressful for me just hearing it. And some of it was because they actually were not even looking at their numbers on a month-on-month basis. They did not have like a financial dashboard. It was an outsourced accountant who's actually putting together the accounts. And so by the time they get the information and like it's already quite late and they're already very behind, right? So a lot of challenges around capability of understanding your own numbers, because sometimes it gets outsourced, not for everybody, but quite a few have that struggle. And so the first piece actually we really worked on was building the confidence, as Nelvin was saying, building the confidence of just understanding the numbers. Every month when you look at your numbers, are you able to project, next month, can I pay salaries? Can I pay for my inventory? Can I do these things? And getting into the discipline of doing that every month, building some very simple financial dashboards where actually you can see the numbers yourself. You don't have to depend on a third person to come and tell you, okay, like this is what's happening in your business. I think that building of confidence is really important. Then you can go to the next pieces of actually then deciding you need capital, how much you need, and all of that. And the two other challenges that we saw was then, now that you know your numbers and you need capital, you have to fix your books, accounts. Like Nebun was saying, many did not have financial statements, or like it was with the accountant, they had not seen it for a long time. Yeah, the balance sheet, the things written in the balance sheet which they did not understand. So the second piece that we really focused on is that we partnered with an accounting firm who actually then sat with many of the women entrepreneurs and then fix the books, help them understand what's going on in their business, because that brings you to the third piece, which is build, talking to investors, talking to banks, who will all ask for these documents. And if you don't have it, then your whole process gets very stressful. So the third piece that we worked on was actually the specifically investment ready. How do you go to raise capital, which is building your data room, putting together the documents that investors will ask for. So to me, all in like a varying degree, everybody had each of these problems: their own confidence around numbers, looking at your numbers month on month. Second was fixing your books and getting your accounting and bookkeeping right. And the third was actually then bringing together all of this information to present in a good way or an easy to understand way to investors. And so as an ecosystem, when we are working with entrepreneurs, sometimes, in incubation and acceleration programs, we don't focus as much on this. And so it's not enough if you prepare the pitch. We need to back it up. And I'm sure Dave when he will be sharing more around this, because sometimes then the due diligence process takes so long because we are waiting in the document. And sometimes nobody knows where it is, sometimes not able to put it together fast enough. And it becomes a challenging experience for all. So I would say these are the three things that we've seen most often. So for us as an accelerator, trying to connect to investors like Dave and Winnie, we were working with women entrepreneurs to really focus on these three things.
Great. Thank you so much, Priya. And I could see some very passionate nodding from both Dave and Winnie about what you were sharing. So I'll toss it on to the two of you, Dave and Winnie, and maybe Winnie, we could start with you. You've spoken to a lot of women entrepreneurs in the Philippines over the last few years. When it comes to due diligence, what are some of the gaps that you see in a lot of Filipino women entrepreneurs, and how can these entrepreneurs work towards a better financial storytelling, if you will, when working with investors like you?
As we are getting to know the entrepreneurs, one of the things that we look at is actually how they are able to articulate their vision for the company. And it is also described in a business plan and going through that process of strategic planning. So that seems to be lacking. Or all the plans are in their head, but nothing's concrete in paper. And what Priya said about having financial information is knowing the journey that you went through. So, what were the key drivers of the business as you were growing? And what were the laggards of that business? So, what do you need to correct? Without that in writing or in documents, you won't be able to chart a path for yourself going forward. So it's really important. I cannot reiterate enough to have a good set of reliable and financial information where you can draw your key performance metrics, you manage your cash, efficiently, and more so in the pandemic, right? If you don't have what are your receivables and payables, how do you manage cash? How do you know how much assistance you can provide your employees if you don't have your cash balances? So it's very important for a woman entrepreneur to have that information handy, as Priya mentioned, that whether to fundraise or to chart a strategic path for your business, and what are the levers of that business that you need to invest on in order to achieve positive outcomes. So it's really coming down to financial information. Of course, a business plan will not be complete with the other levers, like what's business development's going to do, what is marketing going to do. But underneath all these is financial numbers that will help you project what you can do in the future with the resources that you have.
Great. Thanks so much, Winnie. Dave, what about you?
I think they pretty much covered it all, both Priya and Rowena. I think one of the things that I really want to echo is, having a good business plan. Because as investors, and specifically to invest, as we are agnostic investors, right? So we can't be an expert in all of the industries that we want to participate in. So that will really give us a good background as to, your business, your industry, what is your serviceable market, and then what are your plans moving forward, right? And I think that's where we can really provide our input, regards to how do you apply growth capital into that business, how to efficiently use that capital to grow the business. And so another thing that needs to be touched on, I think, is how do you want to structure your business, right? Because we do see a lot of let's say, social enterprises or businesses with strong impacts that tend to internalize their, let's say, non-revenue generating activities, which could potentially be spun off in a foundation or structured differently or fundraised differently, right? So I think there are some things that can be done there. And then another is, having a great pitch deck and having a great business plan. But as we go down to due diligence and actually scrutinizing the details there, not having the substance to back it up. So I think there in fundraising, I think it's, a good 40% is going to be the storytelling, and 60% is going to be the substance that goes right behind it. So you better have a good story, but even better substance to back it up.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. And I think, just want to echo the importance of also documenting all of this, right? Like what Winnie was saying. A lot of times it's in the entrepreneur's head. They actually know their vision, right? But actually putting that down onto paper and seeing something that we can see chart a path towards profitability and growth is another thing. So Nelvin, I want to kind of ask you, right? Like, given everything that our panelists have shared today, how have you navigated this whole journey, right? Of putting together your finances, but also, you know, very much putting together what the story of Green Habits is, and how you tell that story to the investors that you were talking to.
Yes. I agree that numbers really matter because after all, this is a business. But more than just the numbers, I started sharing my personal story, my journey of committing myself to help the smallholder farmers in need since I was young. You see, our enterprise started as a project in a foundation before, but it was stopped. So I continued it because it is really my commitment of helping those people in need. So for me, the enterprise more than just a business. It is a vehicle of change. So that was the message that I've been telling to my investors. So in this way, I believe the investors clearly see my genuine intention of taking care and sustaining the enterprise for a greater purpose. My financial presentation was really very simple at the start. So it was just like, what's my revenue, what's my expenses, the expected income. So it was just like that. And then later on, when I was taught about how to present it well, then it improved. What's really matters is that the investors will clearly see that you have the strong motivation of improving the finances as well as the management of the enterprise to be able to sustain it in a way that your objectives, both for the profit and the social sides, will be achieved. So that is how I navigated it.
Great. Thanks so much, Nelben. I think, Nelben, by the time that you were able to secure your investment from Impact Pioneers, you had also met with many other investors in the ecosystem, right? And one thing that we constantly hear is that entrepreneurs often get predatory terms from investors, right? And many entrepreneurs usually don't fully understand what these terms are and agree to them anyway, without realizing the chunk of the company that they either give away, or all of these things, right? So I want to ask the investors that we have on the panel, Priya, Dave, and Winnie, what are some of the things that entrepreneurs should look out for to avoid these predatory terms? So Priya, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, I'm just laughing. I just came from a similar conversation with an entrepreneur. Uh, so I think this is unfortunately more common than we think, because we're a very young ecosystem, and I think it's not as easy to find investors, not as easy to find out about how investment is done. So there isn't as much transparency, mostly because we're a young and evolving ecosystem. And I would say both investors and, especially if they're individual investors or they're getting started, and entrepreneurs also may not be as knowledgeable about investments itself, and sometimes get into these difficult situations. I think Nelvin kind of charted her journey, right? Like there's a lot of bias, and she's a solopreneur, so there's lots of things that are happening. But I think one of the challenges that we've been trying to kind of address, and this kind of comes even before they get to David or Winnie at that stage, is that when you're really struggling, when you're trying to still build your traction and you don't have capital, then you're really kind of desperate, and sometimes you really need to just pay the salaries, you need to get to your costs, and you're pushed into a corner, and so you might accept terms for two reasons. So you might be in that situation, or two, you may not actually understand the terms. In many cases, the investors also may not understand these terms. So we have seen, and I have been in a lot of situations where I have actually told entrepreneurs, please do not sign this term sheet or don't get into this deal at the very last minute. Mostly because I think there's a lack of understanding of if you give away 50% of your company for 200,000 pesos or 500,000 pesos, by the time you need to raise 10 million or 25 million, you don't own much of the company left. And sometimes people are not able to understand this because it's a young ecosystem, and they don't know other entrepreneurs who have raised this. The investors probably are getting into it for the first time and think this is the way to protect the investment or to help the entrepreneur in some cases. So we are seeing a lot of these things, and I think especially for women entrepreneurs who are already hesitant to get into this, but sometimes you really kind of need that cash. These things do happen. I do believe that it's not in most cases it's not like some evil intention. It really is a lack of knowledge, lack of transparency. So what we really need in the ecosystem is more information around this. I do believe in two things. As entrepreneurs, also do your diligence on the investors, because this is a long-term relationship. It's important to understand, do they align with your values? Is this the type of capital I need to take? You don't all need to take venture capital. You might need a working capital loan, you might need a credit line. So some work in that knowledge of what kind of capital need, and is this the kind of investor that you want to invite into your business, into your life. And that alignment of values is quite important, as much as investors are doing diligence on the entrepreneurs. And I think sometimes the power dynamics, let me be truthful here. Most times the power dynamics are skewed, right? Because the people with the capital hold more power, especially in a situation. And hopefully that will change, as we have more investors, more capital, more entrepreneurs raising money. But today that is the situation, and not everybody has, because it's really a mismatch of where the risk appetite of the investor is and where the entrepreneurs are at, and we have a bit of an imbalance right now, and hence, we are seeing challenges, especially around raising smaller ticket sizes, 20,000 to $200,000. This is not so widely available, and if you're raising more than that, you have certain amount of traction. So here you're trying to tell your story, you're trying to get the money like in that limited time, and then you get into these situations. So I would say my advice would be to all entrepreneurs: do your diligence on the investors as well. Even though you might be scared, you'd want to lose that, if you feel not right, don't get into it. But also educate yourself, understand what is written in that term sheet, and what is the implication for you personally, what is the implication for your business. I think these are simple things. Ultimately, we're all in, these will all be long-term relationships. So you have an investor, they're going to be with you for a while. So we have to not be terrified by it, just do our homework and make a decision based on the information. As I think Winnie said earlier, the information is really the power. There's a lot of help available, but sometimes may not always be the best advice. So ask a couple of people, get a few opinions before you get into it.
Great. Thanks, Priya. Winnie, anything to add to that on what entrepreneurs should look out for?
Yeah, it's basically the same. As Priya mentioned, there is an information asymmetry between, capital providers and entrepreneurs. And for you to bridge that gap is really to ask an entrepreneur who's been in that journey. So it's very important to have that entrepreneur ecosystem where an entrepreneur can reach out to another one and ask about what the journey has been. And this is a good forum because Nelbin has done it. And as she expressed earlier, she found a community in Villgro, and that gave her the confidence to go through that process. And it's really just empowering women in building their confidence, having a sounding board to say, yes, you're on the right path, this is what you need to do. It takes you that you may be so risk averse, but with that support, you just take that step and another step until you achieve something in the end. So it's a long-term relationship. It's 5 to 7 year. You need to be aligned in values in terms of how you're going to run the business and how the investor will be monitoring the business and how much participation that investor would have in helping you, in supporting and running the business. And it really goes beyond knowing the process, knowing values of that investor, what is the exit route for that particular investor, because you don't want your company going to a competitor, or you need to have to preserve what you built in that company and make sure that the next investor that will take the place of the initial investor would preserve it. So really, due diligence, reach out to people who've gone through the same, join the accelerators and the incubators, because they've seen a lot of these happen, and be able to advise you on key items on term sheet negotiations, valuations, how much how much of your company you're willing to give out on what is the value of that.
Great. Thanks so much, Winnie. Dave, anything to add? So Priya has said, do your homework. Winnie has said, to find your tribe, right? So what advice do you have for our women entrepreneurs?
I think Priya and Rowena said it. So as much as entrepreneurs need investors also need entrepreneurs. So I think we also need to close deals, right? And so there is this bit of power dynamic as Priya mentioned. But I think my best advice is that do not be afraid to negotiate, because great companies and great entrepreneurs are lacking, right? And so you are a limited resource, and so if you know that you have a good product, you know that you're a good entrepreneur, don't be afraid to fight for what you think is your worth, right? And it could be a lot. And so this is part of why we designed the short-term financing facilities to get them to, through the smaller fundraising round, get them in a better position, and then help them with a bigger fundraising with us, putting more money as well towards their growth. And my experience with working with accelerators and incubators like Villgro, and we have invested in some of the entrepreneurs that have gone through the programs of Villgro, is that they're so much easier to talk to. They know their story, they know their numbers, and it's just a lot easier when they understand what they need, and where they need the capital to go in order to achieve their growth. And so I think my parting words would be, yeah, don't be afraid to negotiate, because it's a two-way street, right? We need to know you and you need to know us. You also have the power to say no, for whatever we offer. But that financial management of knowing where you are and what you need will give you that power to negotiate, because you should be doing it when your back's not up against the wall. But when you still have lead time, you still have runway, and you still have the capacity to sit down and negotiate.
Great. I love that. I love how David is asking our women entrepreneurs to take that power back from this highly skewed power dynamics. Wonderful. All right. I know that we are coming up to time and this has been a really lovely conversation. So I actually only have a few questions left. So given all of the challenges that you have all outlined today and shared, as well as all of the amazing initiatives that you are working on to really change the landscape and the ecosystem in the Philippines. How should we then, collectively as a local ecosystem, chart this change? How can we move the market towards, being more friendly towards women entrepreneurs? So, what are some of the actions that you would like to see on the supply side of capital? And Priya, maybe I can start with you.
I was going to say that we have to start with David, so we'll say that we agree with David, right?
All right,
Go.
Dave, go ahead.
So I guess on the supply side of capital, I think it's especially in the Philippine context, getting a good understanding of the needs of women entrepreneurs, especially in your target market. All right, and so we do see some regional funds or even some global funds that would want to participate in the Philippines, that brand themselves as SME investors, but are totally out of skew in terms of how they define their SMEs, because they define their SMEs based on first world context, right? And so they would say SMEs are assets that are not above 50 million US dollars. Is that even still an SME in the Philippines, right? It could be a medium, right? But definitely not a small company here in the Philippines. So I think there has to be an alignment on what you're offering, and the businesses that are here in the Philippines. And if that's not something that you can provide, maybe participate with a local market player that can help you figure out what the situation is on the ground. And I think the second part of it is really understanding, or really growing the ecosystem here in the Philippines. We need more Villagros. We need more Invest. We need more QBOs and all these other great organizations that are really laying out the groundwork right now. As much as we all hate competition, we love it in an ecosystem, right? Because then everybody gets the best deal for the market. And so yeah, so I think those are the things that are my call to action is, match your product for capital providers. Let's grow the ecosystem here in the Philippines, for the whole value chain of angel investors, accelerators, growth, Series A's, all the way to the end, all the way to IPO, and support women entrepreneurs, because there is a shift in dynamic in terms of women being great business cases as entrepreneurs and how they contribute back to society. I was just reading this latest article that for every dollar invested in women entrepreneurs, about $12 is given back to the economy in terms of economic activity. And so there's a great business case for investing in women, and that's what we're doing. And we hope you guys can join us too.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. Winnie, what about you? What is your wish to see in the ecosystem, and also a call to action to our viewers?
Just highlighting also what Dave mentioned is really demonstrating that investing in women and investing in women entrepreneurs and investing in companies that support women are viable financial investments, which would, really attract mainstream capital into this space, the same way that climate has attracted mainstream capital as well as ESG. So having that, demonstration effect would signal, capital providers, and the same way that, institutional investors are looking for investment products that would have intentional and measurable impact. And this is the way that we bridge the gap, the needs of institutional investors versus the needs of entrepreneurs on the ground, and being able to deliver the impact, as Dave had mentioned, because of the multiplier effect that women entrepreneurs and women employees actually generate for the economy. So the call to action is really continue. I mean, different stakeholders, we convene, we look for ways to bridge that gap. It's investing in women, highlighting those through case studies, and showing, you know, investors and how we are creating impact on the ground through our interventions, close engagement with the entrepreneurs. And this would really pique the interest of investors, and hopefully we can divert some of the money or funding from Africa and, into Southeast Asia, and of course the Philippines.
Wonderful. Thanks, Winnie. Nelben, what about you? What do you wish to see in the ecosystem and your call to action?
Yes, for the supply side, I hope that they will have to continue to set aside a portion of their investments for women entrepreneurs only. In this way, they will be able to help us in contributing to the economy by our own enterprises. For you, our incubators, Villgro, Invest, and we have Sweet. I'm sorry, the name is Sweet. Um, yeah. Okay. I just would like to say that please continue the discussion. It it's only this way that we will be informed of what needs to be done, and you are linking us to the capital side, and this is a very good way of helping really the women entrepreneurs. And for my fellow women entrepreneurs, let's listen to our mentors. Priya said, let's do our homework. It's basic. Um, yes, and let's find our tribe, like Shwena has said. And also, be courageous, like David just mentioned. Those are the things that we really need to do. So, knowledge is power, they said. So the more that we are knowledgeable of what are the things to be done for us to be successful, then we should do it. Let's not have second thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Nelven. And finally, Priya, what are some of the things that you wish to see in our ecosystem?
Yeah, it's really hard to follow all that incredible insights. But I could not agree more strongly. I think number one, we need like more people. I think Dave is absolutely right. We need more people supporting women entrepreneurs, more capital being unlocked, because simply put, they are highly underserved today. So we need capital that understands women-led businesses and can be flexible, and we need to change We are always talking about what women entrepreneurs need to do. Of course, there are certain things they need to, but the supply side also needs to adapt. We can't keep announcing new products and then very few women entrepreneurs actually can access it. So there's a mismatch with the needs and what's available, and we have to address that, because that's the way that we're going to grow the GDP. That's the way that we're going to improve our communities. That's the way that we're going to improve our families. I think the other piece that I would just add is really more collaboration along the continuum of support, right? And this is something that we really believe strongly in. And, both Dave and Winnie have been great supporters of this. So I think each of us play a role in the ecosystem, and we play a role along the journey of enterprises. Our role, for example, for Villgro was really to surface these entrepreneurs, get sort of the basics of investment readiness going, making sure there's a platform for people like Dave and Winnie to connect with these women entrepreneurs, and also at the same time educate the women entrepreneurs and also let the investors know. So that's a role that we play, which is very different from what Dave or Winnie is playing. But so I think there's a role for all of us, and I think we need to kind of line up along that continuum of support and capital. And sometimes, we are all very focused on our own vision, mission, and goals, and we don't collaborate. And I'm very proud to say that everybody here on this panel have actively and very radically collaborated, and we are very committed to continuing to do so. So that's really what we need. We need more of collaborations. We need more connections, and as Nelvin put it beautifully, we need more of these conversations. My dog is also very, very interested in this discussion. I apologize, but I think at the core of it, there's so much good intention, but we need to follow that up with action, and that action can come through radical collaboration. I truly believe that. So that would be my call to action to the ecosystem.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, Dave, Winnie, Nelben, and Priya. And my call to action is for all the women entrepreneurs out there. If you are looking for your tribe and you haven't found it yet, please do join the We Rise community. I think we can have some details flashing on the screen about how to join. But essentially what Priya was saying, this is a community where you get to meet other women entrepreneurs to understand what their challenges are, to share in those same challenges, but also to celebrate the same successes. And very, very happy to say that all of the panelists we have on today are already members of this community. So this is a community not only for women entrepreneurs, but also for investors, for service providers, also for entrepreneur support organization. And so, what Priya was mentioning, we have to collaborate more across this continuum of support. And we hope that you would join us through the We Rise community. So thank you again to all of our panelists. It's been a wonderful discussion today, and hope to see you online and hopefully in person one of these days. But for now, see you at the We Rise community. Thank you, everybody.